Glad that you could join us this morning, and thanks for being with us and tuning in. If you're a guest with us, we'd love to connect with you, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at any point for any reason at all. Today we're going to actually spend a little bit of time continuing our discussion, this discussion we've been having for several weeks now about when seasons of life change or in various transitions or even trials of life. We've been talking about the ways that God leads us through that, the ways that our mindset should be, and even the posture that our heart should have in that. And so today will be a little bit of a continuation of that theme, and I just am eager to share with you. So if you would, I'd like you to pull out the scriptures, and I'd like to turn over to 1 Peter chapter 1. So we're going to turn over to 1 Peter chapter 1, and it should be on the screen there for you as well. But I'd like to read that together. It starts in verse 3. All praise to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. It is by his great mercy that we have been born again. Because God raised Jesus from the dead, now we live with great expectation, and we have a priceless inheritance, an inheritance that is kept in heaven for you, pure and undefiled, beyond the reach of change and decay. And through your faith, God is protecting you by his power until you receive his salvation, this salvation which is ready to be revealed on the last day for all to see. And then I want you to see that first phrase in verse 6. It says, so truly be glad. Let me say that again. So be truly glad. Did you see that? Did you catch that? So be truly glad, authentically glad, actually glad. Don't fake it. You have no reason to come to church or to show up with Christian friends and pretend to be glad. He says you have reason to be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though, and this is kind of what I want you to see too, wonderful joy ahead. Be glad right now because you will be glad at some point. Because because of all that we've talked about with Jesus, he says, even though at this point you may endure many trials for a little while. Now, I want to unpack some of that for you, and I'm going to keep the scriptures out because I want you to just sort of track with me here as we follow along. But in verse 3, if you'll go back to that, he says, all praise to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. It's by his great mercy that we've been born again. So initially, when we come to understand how we should have great joy, he says, be truly glad, and we're going to tie everything to that concept. If we're to be truly glad because of the great joy that lies ahead and because of realities that we're supposed to understand right now, what are those realities? If I'm going to call you to faith, and if that faith or that trust in God is going to be life-giving and even joy-inducing, then what is it that we're believing? That's what he's addressing here in Peter at the beginning of his book. He's telling us that it's by God's great mercy that we've been born again. In other words, in our mind's eye, when we go through trials, transition, various seasons of life, in our mind's eye, we are to go back in time to the point in which God saved us, at the point in which we understood and received the good news for ourselves and where we had been born again. So he draws our attention to maybe one of the first times, if not the first time we ever heard the good news about Jesus. And that is meant to remind us of the significance of what Jesus has done. I'm going to read it again. This is where he says it's by his great mercy, verse 3. His great mercy, it's by his mercy we've been born again because God raised Jesus Christ from the dead. And we have that as our great hope. And then he goes on to tell us that there's more things that we have to hope for. Verse 4, and we also have a priceless inheritance. He doesn't say that we will have a priceless inheritance, but that because Jesus died for us, was buried, and he rose again from the grave, and he ascended now into heaven to sit at God's right hand where he rules and reigns. He says that because of that, because of the fact that we believed in Jesus, we have presently an eternal, unfading inheritance that is ours right now. It's an inheritance that is kept in heaven for you, pure and undefiled, beyond the reach of change and decay. So I think that's actually something that's worth talking about for us as we think about what is it that we think about when we go through life changes or transition or seasons of life that are maybe come with its mix of ups and downs. He says that we have an inheritance. So not only do we go back to the death and burial and resurrection of Jesus in our mind's eye and just remember the faith that we have in him because of all that he's done, but we also want to have faith in the fact that we have an inheritance with him and something belongs to us that will never fade away. We cannot lose it. He says it will never change. Did you see that in the verse? It will never change. It will never decay. And isn't that what we fear, sometimes maybe fear the most when we go through various seasons of life? That something in the mix of that season will change, and we don't want it to change. Something in the mix of that season may go away, and we don't want it to decay. We don't want it to die. We don't want it to go away. And I think a lot of times at the core of some of our faith issues really isn't that we don't love God or we don't love our friends who are trying to encourage us. There's oftentimes something like fear or shame or something like that. But there's generally some kind of fear that we're resisting change because we don't want to lose something. Or maybe it's that we don't want to gain something we don't want. We don't want more trouble or more problems or more hardships. So we're afraid of maybe bringing trouble upon ourselves, or we might be afraid of losing something. And that, I think, is maybe at the core of our resistance to change. But what Peter is teaching us here in this passage is that when we go through various seasons of life, and he describes those for us, the trials of life, when we go through those, he's reminding us that for all the things that are changing in our life, for all the things that could change, for all the things that might decay, for the relationships that might go away, for the finances that might go away, for the job that might go away, for the security of a home that might go away because now you've got to move or whatever. There could be any number of those kinds of things. But when we understand the good news about Jesus, we understand that for all the things that could change and all the things that could go away, we have something in our possession that will never change. It will never go away. And it is what Jesus has secured for us in his death, burial, resurrection, and ascension into heaven. It's his inheritance, his good standing with the Father, his ability to rule and to reign. It's his power. It's even his spirit. It's everything that belongs to Christ that he shares with us. Those are our inheritance, and they can never go away, and they will never change. We always have access to that. That's good news. And I think that the struggle for faith is actually the struggle to transition our sense of security, maybe, from the things that we're counting on to never change, for example, to transferring our sense of security to the things that we can count on because they'll never change. So what that means then is that I think as we journey through this life of faith, we want to place our trust in what Jesus has done for us, all that is ours because of who Jesus is and what he has done for us. And in that way, I think we can get through the various ups and downs in life with our faith being more and more strengthened as each time we go through trouble, we cling tighter to the good news of Jesus, to him and to all that is ours in him. And as we do that, our faith is strengthened. And each time we go through hardship, allowing our faith to be strengthened, it actually prepares us for all that God has in store. So I would encourage us, place your faith in him and all that he's done for us. But it's not just like his gospel, his death, burial, and resurrection. But did you notice too that Peter actually points us in the direction of the future? So there's what Jesus has done for us. There's what's ours, that's ours now, that we can cling to. And then there's what will be ours in the future. So I want you to see that with me as we just study this passage today. So I'm going to show it to you here where he says, I'm going to read verse 4 again. He says, and In addition to the salvation we have, being born again, the gospel, the good news of Jesus, and, verse 4, we have a priceless inheritance, an inheritance that's kept in heaven, pure and undefiled, beyond the reach of change and decay. Verse 5, look at this. And through your faith, meaning your ongoing trust in him, your trust in him when you first believed in the gospel, and your ongoing trust in the inheritance that's yours, and through that faith in him, that trust in him, God is protecting you by his power until you receive the salvation. So now we're looking ahead to the day that we receive the salvation that's been promised to us. The salvation which is ready to be revealed on the last day for all to see. So now he's drawing our attention to the future. And that's when he says, so be truly glad. On the basis of Jesus, all that he's done for us, all that he has secured for us now, past, present, and all that he will do for us in the future. When we think about the trials and the suffering that we go through, when we think about just, it doesn't have to be negative, but just the various changes in life and the seasons of life that we go through, remembering the gospel through the lens of maybe the past, present, future might be a way for us to actually cling to the faith we have in Jesus. So in other words, I'm trying to help us with maybe a simple way of encouraging ourselves when we're going through the various ups and downs in life. Remember the gospel, and remember the past, present, and future elements of the good news about Jesus. I think that helps us when we go through these trials. And so does Peter. Peter says it this way in verse 7. So now we get to verse 7. These trials will show that your faith is genuine. So I can say that I trust God. I can say that I believe in Jesus. But when I go through trials, am I actually believing in Jesus? Am I clinging to him? And how would you know if you don't go through trials? So I think that's what God is doing in our lives. It's strengthening our faith. It's giving us more confidence. Each time we go through trials with strengthened faith, I think what it does for us is actually give us a confidence that this is real faith. This is a real relationship. This is a real God with real help for people going through real times. And that gives us confidence. So that's what he's saying here. These trials will show that your faith is genuine. You'll be built up that way. And it's being tested the same way that fire is tested and the same way that fire purifies gold. So you're being tested and purified. And he even goes on to say that your faith, this trust that you have in God, is far more precious than mere gold anyways. So in other words, if you're going to invest in something, he says that if you're looking for which of the two has a greater return on investment, investing in your faith has a greater return than gold, which will change and will decay. But our faith in Jesus is rooted in something that will never change, never decay. That's the good news. And that's the prompt for us today to believe in this. So he says, this is the continuation of verse 7. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, which we will go through, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. So now he's encouraging you to realize that actually the investments that you make in your journey of faith, the investments you make to really fight the good fight, to believe when it feels like it's hard to believe, or even when all the circumstances seem to indicate that there's nothing to believe in, or whatever you're believing in is not going to happen, not going to come true, or that God has forgotten, or that he doesn't care. But whatever it is we're being tempted to believe that isn't the truth, he's saying that when you fight that good fight to believe the truth over and above the various lies that we're being attacked with on a day-to-day, season-to-season basis, he says that when you do that, the return on your investment is that it will bring you praise and glory and honor. You will also receive those with Jesus when he is revealed to the whole world. In other words, Jesus is going to receive praise. He's going to receive honor. He's going to receive glory. And in this life, though he shares his sufferings with us and we share our sufferings with him, we share in sufferings together. What Jesus is saying is, not only will I share my sufferings with you, I'm inviting you to invest in this journey together, this relationship together, because he intends to share his praise. The praise that he will receive, he will share with us. The glory that he will receive, he will share with us. The honor that he will receive, he will share that with us when we are committed to and fighting that good fight of faith to live faithfully with him and to pursue that good news. So as we do that, he's saying that there's hope for us. There's the faith that we have in what Jesus has done. We take everything back to that moment and say, I believe in the one who gave himself for me. And we actually take our mind's eye and say, I believe in the one who not only died for me and was risen again, but went to heaven and sits at the right hand, who now rules and reigns with the Father. And I am participating with him in that, and I enjoy that presently. And I am glad to go through some of these hard times and to demonstrate, that I believe he's faithful, but to demonstrate that I desire to be a faithful servant of his, because in the future I know that he will share his inheritance with me, his honor, his praise, his glory. And he and I, though we cried together many nights in prayer, will be laughing together, rejoicing together for the rest of eternity someday when Jesus comes back. So that sounds, nice. Sounds fancy. It sounds religious almost. But I think I'm asking us to believe that. I'm asking us to take some time and to see that doesn't just sound like religious speak or like a Sunday school lesson or like a preacher teaching something that you're watching on a video, but that you're reading this, absorbing this, and letting it sink in, and that it might actually have an impact on our lives. He actually goes on to tell us that there's more to it. So look at verse 8, and then we'll wrap this up. He says this, you love him even though you have never seen him. And then he says, though you don't see him now, even though you can't see him now, you've never seen him before and you don't see him now, he says, even though you don't see him, you trust him. And I think for us, I want to encourage you this way. He seems to delineate, and I don't know exactly how he would delineate that. I just want you to be aware that he is actually sort of showing that those are two different things. You love him, even though you've never seen him, and you trust him, even though you don't see him now. I think it's possible that we might struggle to trust him and be able at the same time to say, but I do love him, and I think he knows that. I think of examples in the Bible where Jesus is, for instance, talking with Peter, which may be really fitting since Peter's writing what we're reading today from 1 Peter chapter 1. Jesus asks Peter, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, yes, I love you. But you didn't trust me. When you were confronted with the reality of that trial that I was going through, when Jesus says that I was, he knows, and Peter knows what he's talking about, that when Jesus was going to be crucified, Peter denied him 3 times. But Jesus actually comes back to him and says, Peter, do you love me? And he says, yes, I love you. Okay, feed my sheep. Peter, you love me? Yes. Okay, feed my lambs. Peter, do you love me? And he says, Jesus, you know I love you. That's not the issue. And we get to the issue. And Jesus begins then to minister to Peter and call him, I think, back into a renewed trust relationship, saying, hey, Peter, I know you love me, and I want you to know I love you too. Trust has been broken. Let's rebuild trust together. So I want to encourage you that way. I want to encourage you that all is not lost when you're struggling to love him. That's maybe a different sermon. But all is not lost when you're struggling to trust him. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you, that's for sure. But it doesn't also have to mean that you don't love him. I say lean into your love for him. When you're struggling to trust him, lean into his love for you and allow the trust to be restored again. So he says, look, you love him even though you've never seen him. Even though you don't see him now, you trust him. And you rejoice with a glorious, inexpressible joy, and the reward for trusting him will be the salvation of your souls. I want to encourage you to think about all that you're going through, And then I want you to take what you're thinking about, just all the things in your life, the various seasons of life, maybe a season you're coming out of, a season you're going into, a transition that's happening in your life. We're all going through transitions. I've been transparent about what's happening in my life and with my family, and even transparent about what's happening in our church as well. And so I want to encourage you, though, as we go through that, our greatest sense of security is not in fixing the problem. So, okay, we're transitioning from this and we're going to need that. So if we can just get that, everything will be okay. And that's not exactly the source of our faith, the source of our joy. We might say and plan for things to happen, but in the midst of it all, our faith remains in Jesus. His death for us, his burial for us, his resurrection for us, his ascension to heaven for us, his inheritance that he shares with us, the future eternal praise and honor that he shares with us, the life that we live with him, the eternal joy, inexpressible joy that we will have with him, that we do presently have, and that we will have with him forever. Turn your attention to those things. Fix your gaze on them. Fix your focus on them. And allow that over a period of time. It might be 15 minutes one morning, could be 30 minutes one morning, it could be during a drive, it could be at various times throughout the week, and it would be over time anyways. But allow yourself some space today, throughout the weekend, throughout the week, to just consider the good news of Jesus, the past, the present, and the future, and ask God to encourage your faith. Thanks again for joining us. We're so happy to be able to share good news with you. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We would love to hear from you, and we'd especially love to pray with you. And again, if you have any questions, or even especially if you want to take the next step in following Jesus, would you reach out to us? Today, I can't think of a better day. Today would be a great day to take that next step. And if you're struggling with your faith, won't you reach out? Let us pray with you. Let us encourage you.